I guess, throughout the training too, you're all in listen-only mode. But if you have questions, I certainly want to answer them. I just ask that you type them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I'll keep an eye on that. Whatever questions come in, I'll read out loud and then provide the answer so everybody can benefit. You know, and if somebody asks a question and then you need to re-ask it, that's okay. I want to make sure you guys leave here with a clear understanding. So if you've got the questions, ask them. I'm going to give it about another minute or two before we get going. Again, just to make sure everybody can get logged in and participate. You should be seeing, oh, sorry, will this be available later via video? Yeah, so I'm recording it right now, and probably later this afternoon it'll be all configured and buffered, everything that it needs to do from GoToMeeting, so I can put it out on Dropbox. So we do right now share these through a Dropbox link. If for some reason your company is blocking Dropbox, you may have to open it up at home. All right, but once you open it, you can download it. All right, so you should be seeing a Demand Tools Today screen in front of you. So I'm logged into Demand Tools. If you're not seeing that, let me know. All right, I haven't seen anybody log in here in about a minute or two, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just need to move a couple things out of the way. Okay, just for anybody who did just log in, everybody's in listen-only mode, but if you guys have questions, you should ask them, so I can answer them for you. And you do that with the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. Just type them in there. I'm not going to stop and ask if you guys have questions. Well, let me put it this way. I may stop every once in a while and ask, but you don't have to wait for that as your cue to be able to ask me something. If it comes to you, type it in. If I am not at a good breaking point, I'll just put it off until I am at a good breaking point, but I'll make sure it gets answered. If for some reason you ask me a question I can't answer today, which hopefully that does not happen, but should it, I will log a case for you and then obtain the proper information and get it sent over. Okay? If you guys want a recording of today's session, you may want to make that designation later after we go through the session, but if you want the recording, you can either go to our website and open a case to request it that way. You can email me directly. Frankly, if you open a case, it's probably going to get tended to a bit quicker. My email gets a little bit jumbled up, so it might take me a day to get through it and find, you know, if those requests are there. Also, if you're logged into Demand Tools, you can go to the tech support tile and just log a case from here. Same page you're going to see on our website. Okay, and I know what you're thinking, because I know there's some grant users here that you're like, well, I don't qualify for tech support. And that's true, but if you want a recording of a session, get to us by all means. And if this is the best way by logging a case, that's okay. Also for NFP users or the grant program users, you guys do have your own little area over here, and there's also our tech forum. With any hope, we will be expanding that throughout the year for everybody. So I think we've got some good things coming down the pipe for our online support stuff too. All right, so let's go back to the Demand Tools Today page. We saw the tech support thing. We saw the live training because you guys are here, and then the self-help. This will take you to another page that will either allow you to search our knowledge base or go to the help documentation. You know, all these other tiles will get you there too. Share your ideas. Now you can email research and development, that's fine. You can log a case, you can email me. Whatever feedback you guys have about the tool, about the training, if you're worried about getting stuck into a dark hole and not going anywhere, by all means use my email address. I'll make sure it gets routed to the right spot. Okay, because if you guys have something to say, we want to hear it. All right. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started into the single table dedupe. Now, just as a reminder, today's the fundamentals, so it's just the basics of how to get through a single table dedupe process. We're going to talk about, you know, just where to click and what each function does. We're going to talk about mapping types, deduping best practices. We'll talk about selecting master records and, you know, what happens to the data once it's merged in Salesforce, all that stuff. So If you're looking for training on the newer features for the field rules, that's going to be in the single table dedupe advanced session. My recommendation, if you're new, take them both. Or if you're not new and getting a refresher, take them both. There's some, I think, some interesting things you'll learn. Even if it's just a couple things here and there in the session, sometimes it's good just to come to our sessions and see if maybe something has changed. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Another way to access your help documentation, and I think this is important for you guys to know because it's easy. You've got this white question mark with a green background, and this gets really picky where you click over here. So if I click that icon, it's going to launch me to the single table dedupe specific help pages. Of course, there it goes. My computer's just taking a while. If you actually click on the word single table dedupe, it's going to launch the module. Now, of course, you can sort through our help docs and find them, but this just makes it a tad easier if your internet connection isn't horribly slow. What is the best way to handle questions when you're in the middle of a project? I'm not sure. You mean for me? I'm not sure what you're asking. Can you expand on that a little bit? For me, if you're asking, oh, I see what you mean. Like if you, sorry, it's Monday morning. If you're in the middle of doing something and you need a hand with working on the single table dedupe. Yeah, you can call us, but I'll be honest, guys, we're a small company. We do a great job supporting our end users, but getting somebody on the phone, if it isn't a prearranged call, will be hit or miss, okay? But we have awesome support. So if you call us and you don't get somebody, by all means leave a message, but honestly the easiest and quickest way you're going to get seen is if you log a case on our website, because, you know, obviously we've got Salesforce email to case stuff, and that's going to get put in our queue, and we live inside that queue. So if we see it there, you're going to get tended to that day, unless for some reason you're emailing us at 6:59 Eastern PM and, you know, we're all going home for the day. But if you log something today, it's very rare, and somebody would probably have to be out sick for you to not get a response today. So logging a case is always a good idea. And I do encourage you guys to use the log a case page rather than emailing, only because it starts prompting you for information that we're going to inevitably ask you for anyway, and just to save you some of the emailing back and forth. You know, but sometimes you're out and about and you're mobile and you're on your phone and you can just shoot an email, and that's okay too. Okay, so all the stuff you guys see here, pretty much what we're going to go over except for field rules, okay? All right. The single table dedupe, the first best practice I'll share with you is this is where you're going to start your deduping efforts, okay? A lot of people think, well, you know I have a lot of deduplication to do between my leads and my contacts, my leads and accounts, and if that's a pressing issue, then go ahead and take care of it, you know? But I don't want you to think that, oh, okay, I've done that, I've gotten it out of the way, because what we would recommend in a perfect world of, you know, business slowing down for you to take care of your data is to go in and dedupe your accounts, even if you're thinking, well, my accounts aren't the issue. Just go through the motions and see, because it does become a little bit of a discovery process to find out what's in your data. You'll be surprised at how acquainted you get with your data with running processes like this. You just can't help to notice the nuances. So run it first against your accounts, then do your contacts, then do your leads. Okay. Any other object after that you can do in whatever order you want. All right, or not at all if there's not an issue there. Typically, you know, accounts, contacts, leads, where we're dealing with the people and the companies and everybody wanting that information in the system is where duplicates are going to be most prevalent. And then once you clean up those tables individually, okay, as best as you can. I mean, I think we're all going to have a little margin of dupes in there. But once you do everything the best you can in the single table dedupe and get the individual tables cleaned up, then I would say you're in a better position to start cross-comparing tables. It's always easier, right, to have a clean table compared to another clean table, because then there's just less junk that you have to sift through, less things you got to think about. But again, if this is where you need to start because there's such a pressing issue, go ahead and do it, but remind yourself that this is just the first pass, just to, you know, take the heat off. go back through that process I just explained, and then once you do the individual tables, revisit, your cross-table comparisons, because you may find stuff that just didn't get noticed before. And in the help documentation, let's just flip back over there for a moment. Oh, where is hang on. Normally we have a deduping best practices. There it is. It's on this front page. So if you click under cleansing modules. Okay, so these are really good best practices. And, if we're saying, oh, do a backup and all this, don't get scared about stuff. We're just telling you because we want you to be aware of what's going on. Working with data is a tedious, delicate process, and you just have to be very aware of the buttons you're clicking and the effect that it's going to have on not only the records you're working with, but if there's any trickling down effect, with built-in processes that you have. All right, so we just talked about this one, deduping in the following order. It mentions parent objects should be merged before child or related objects. So that's why we said accounts before contact. All right, and think about this with me for a minute, because if you're merging accounts, right? Let's say you have accounts. There's two of them, and they each have a contact associated. When we merge those accounts, now we just have one account, and then we'll have one account with two contacts associated. It makes sense because when you're merging an object, it combines, not merges, but it combines the related objects, so that it gives those related objects another piece of information that they have in common. In this case, for the contact, the account ID, which is just going to facilitate an easier dedupe process down the line, because the more you start with a top-down approach, the more things you're giving these records in common for you to work off of when you're trying to find a duplicate. Okay, and it's just the cleanest approach, right? I think most of us have been working with data for a while. If anybody's new to working with data, this is just sort of the mindset you have to get in, this top-down approach. All right, let's go back. And we'll reference that page every once in a while, but I just want you to be aware that, what I'm telling you, not only will it be available in a video form, it's available in text. We're trying to hit you hard with the same information so it sticks. A couple different ways you can start your deduping process. Of course, you can start this manually, and you choose every last setting you want, and that's fine. I'm a little bit lazier, so I like to use some of the pre-builts that we have and then modify them. So let me show you the difference. Say I come in here and I'm getting ready to start. We're going to do our accounts. Let's use account from the drop-down for the object to dedupe. Click use object. It goes through. It's pulling down all my metadata from Salesforce. I'm having a very slow internet connection today, so you're going to have to bear with me. All right. Then the progression from this drop-down is to come over here to the right. And what we're asking you to do here is to select the field that you want to see when we bring you back a list of duplicates that we've found. And I know as you're thinking, well, we haven't even told it how to find duplicates. That doesn't matter. We're going to do that on the next screen. This first screen is all about selecting the object, selecting the fields to view on your results screen. So when you're deciding which records are supposed to be masters or which ones should even be merged, you're looking at the pertinent data from those records in Salesforce to make those decisions. So you would check these boxes off. And then the bottom portion is just specifying if you want to affect your entire account database with this process, or if you want to use conditions and just look at a subset of the data. Okay, either is fine. But you can see that it's a very manual process. There's a lot of things to consider here. We have some pre-built scenarios in these folders on the left. If I expand that, just by clicking, you're going to see the pre-built up top, and then you'll see any of the custom scenarios I've saved down below. You can do both. Use the pre-built as they are, or you can use them and modify them and then save them as something different. So at least you know where our starting off points are. And to be clear about these pre-builts, this is not trying to tell you that, oh, after tried and true testing, this is the best way to deduplicate your data. No, Salesforce is very customizable. We all know this. How we work with our data is going to be very different from org to org. So these pre-builts are a good jumping off point if you just don't know where to start, because they start matching on common things like the account name, the address, the phone, typical stuff that you would think about having when you're first getting a database set up, okay? They don't take into account things like custom fields, which may be very important for you. And if they are, cool, add them in. But let's just take a look at one of these pre-built. I think this is a good one. I've cloned a couple of these. Okay, so this would be the one that you get with the tool. And the synopsis here in the middle gives you just an overview. So selection of records. We're using all records, which is referring to down here, and we're going to talk through that stuff in detail. Criteria for finding duplicates. This stuff is not addressed until the next screen, but it's showing you in the red ink here on the left the fields that we're going to eventually match upon, as well as the mapping types used. And then the master rule, and that's just back over on screen 3, so we haven't even gotten there yet. But this is showing you all the different settings that are saved for that scenario, and once we get through the detail talking about them, they'll make sense. But just so you know, when you're looking at this, if you're like, oh, that's not really one I want to use, you can click through and look at the settings and figure out which one is closest to what you want to use that needs the least modifications. If you want to load up a scenario, you can double-click and select it for it. Maybe it's not all-encompassing of every field you want, which I certainly wouldn't expect it to be, but it's a start. Another way to load a scenario, and I want you to be aware of the differences here. So you saw me double-click on a pre-built, okay, or one that was saved. You can also click Load Scenario, and you might be thinking, oh, well, it's loading the one I have highlighted. Actually, what it's doing, my computer could speed up, that'd be nice, is taking you out to the file directory where these scenarios are saved. Okay, maybe you have a scenario that you didn't save in the standard folder structure. You put it out on your desktop. That's okay, you can still navigate there now and find it. In previous versions, that wasn't available. Okay, if you would highlight this, then click Load Scenario, and it would load the settings. But now we've added in this extra layer of file structures. So double-clicking what you're seeing here loads it. Clicking Load Scenario allows you to navigate throughout your PC to find the file. Run Scenario will actually run the loaded scenario and apply the master rules, do the merging, so it's running it. It's processing it all, okay? And then Delete Scenario is just deleting the one you have saved. That's highlighted. So maybe I look at this one and I'm like, I don't really like that one. Let's delete it. Asks me if I'm sure. Yeah. And then it's no longer in my structure. All right, hang on, there's a question out there. Okay, I see what you're asking. And I will address that soon. Okay, so now that we know how to load the scenario, again, over here, the natural progression is just to come over to your fields that you want to view on the result grid. If you want something other than what's checked off, you've got access to all your standard and custom fields, and you can just check those off here. So I'm going to pull in another field, but I want to point out, in a second, we're going to talk about table structure. So I'm going to bring in product of interest, and I also want to bring in oh, sorry, I was bringing website, can't find my field. Now you're noticing too that some of these fields have plus signs next to them. These indicate a table joined or a joined object in Salesforce. I think the easiest way to explain this is if we talk about owner, okay? When you choose an owner in Salesforce for a record, it's a lookup to the user record in Salesforce. So you can choose somebody that's a user to own that record. Salesforce assigns every record, including user records, a Salesforce ID. They all start with 00 something. I don't know my own owner ID, so I'm not going to know anybody else's. They're 15 to 18 digits long. It's just not something we commit to memory. But I do know everybody's name, and I do know like their alias and things like that. So what I can do is instead of just bringing in this owner ID, which I'm going to bring it in so you can see the difference, and I dragged and dropped to reorder, I can expand this table join, and now it's saying, all right, I know you want information from this table. What do you want? Do you want the name of the person? And that's what we pulled here. You'll know that a field has come from a joined table because it has the table's name in front of the field name with the table name, dot, and then field name. All right. But these just give you access to the field level data on that object. And again, in here, you want to bring down fields that will help you select your master records and just whatever information you might need to see to decide. Number one, do I want to merge these records even though my results have shown them to be duplicates? And number two, if I do want to merge them, because of the data I'm looking at, which one should be the master? I see somebody with their hand up, and I appreciate you doing that. However, in order to ask questions, since we're all muted, can you type it into the questions area? And then once I see it show up there, I will respond. GoToWebinar is great, but if I start unmuting people, a lot of times it gives crazy feedback and you can't hear one another, so I apologize, but that's just one of the things we've got to battle here on GoToWebinar. So yeah, feel free to type in your question. We'll get to it. All right, once you choose the fields for the object that you're deduping, we want to know, do you want to use all of the account records or conditions to say just a subset? If you want to use all, that's fine. You can just move on to step 2. Let's talk about using conditions, though, because this will help you subset down the data. And maybe you want to do this for sheer volume of records. Maybe it's because you're one of 5 administrators, and this is just the subset of data that you're allowed to work with. Or you're looking for something specific. You know, there's a lot of different reasons you would subset. So let's say I deal with stuff in Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. That's kind of my territory of data to manage. So those are all the records I want to see. I'm going to say billing state, and I choose my operator. Exclamation point equal sign represents not equal to. And I'm going to say equals, and then we'll do the state value. A comma for or, no space after the comma. This little help icon over here gives you some information about using conditions. It also gives you a link to the help documentation about conditions. Okay, so it'll remind you that no space after the comma. And then I can put in other values. So maybe it's OHIO or PA or New York. Okay. And the value here is not case sensitive. And then I add in that condition. So now the system says, all right, we're deduping accounts, and that's good, and these are the fields we want to see, but we're only going to evaluate records where the billing state is one of these 4 variations. Okay, if it doesn't fit in one of those 4 variations of the state, it will not be considered during this process. You can get more granular with this too. We can go down a little bit and say, all right, and the billing city has to be one of these cities. Now these 2 conditions are anded to each other. So the city and the state have to meet one of these criteria, and if it doesn't, it won't be evaluated. Some people want to know, though, well, I want it to be one of these states or one of these cities. So you want to or these conditions, and to do that, you turn on expert mode. Okay. They still have the same or group number on the right here, so that's what we turn on with enabling expert mode, which means since they have the same or group number, they are still anded to each other. If I would like these to be OR'd, I have to switch one of these numbers. So I can click in here and type a 2 or use the directional buttons. Okay. But once they're in different OR group numbers, they are now OR'd to each other. And you can have multiple conditions in each group. If you want to get rid of a condition, you click the blue box to the left and then delete on your keyboard. If you're using a Mac, it might be function delete instead of just delete. That just depends on your keyboard setup. And of course, if I wanted to ever take everything back to being ANDed, I just turn off expert mode. What is going on? Sorry about that. All right, I have a question out here. Let's take a look at that. Ooh, I got a bunch of questions. Look at you guys. All right, cool. Let me get back up here. Okay, when you look at data from another table, are you forcing an inner join between the account table and the outer table, owner table in this example? Nope, the join's there. I'm not forcing anything. They're just joined already in Salesforce. I'm simply saying, instead of seeing the ID, which is typically what fills a lookup field, which is what the owner field is on the account, I want to see the specifics behind that ID. So show me these fields of information. So it's not forcing any sort of relationships. It will only show you relationships if they're already there in Salesforce. Let's see, yes, these were separated with commas. Any of the conditions here are separated with commas. If you use a value, wait. Oh, are you saying like, not like? No. Like and not like here. Let me show you guys. I think it's easier to view that. Okay, so here's the like and not like operator. It's for matching partial text strings. It does have wildcard support. So last name like APPL underscore wildcard returns the last name of Appleton or Apple or Applin because it's looking for the APPL, of course, and then it gives an underscore to say there's more characters, and then the wildcard to say whatever those characters are. Okay, so hopefully that'll give you some better examples of how to use like. Hang on, I moved my question. Can you use parentheses for more specificity? No. Good questions, though, guys. All right, so if you look for a field on the owner table and you have an account with no owner specified, would they drop out of your result set? No, this is simply just saying, show me the values from these fields. It's not specifying that the value has to be anything or that there has to even be a populated value. It's just saying, show me these fields of information from the records that will get, which will be my results of the dupe finding process. Okay, orphaned, well, not orphaned because they're not. I don't think it's possible for you to have an account without an owner. So you might want to look into that, unless somehow or another you guys overrode that. Let's see, can I use a condition that applies to one of the dupe records but not the other? So that, yes, but that's crossing into more of the advanced features. So let's just talk about this for a second. You've got your filter match results here. That's where you're going to be able to specify, well, at least one of my records needs to have this condition. Okay, so you can do that with the filter match results stuff, but again, not something we're going to go over today. All right, in the value section down here, is that only going to include records that have that? What if one is possible dupe or other things match, but the city is different? Then if you're using a value like this, you're excluding them. This is saying that, yes, for records to be considered, they have to meet these criteria. So you've got to be careful with conditioning because you may condition out records that you want to see. All right. Very cool. Awesome. Okay, good, good. I'm just looking at some replies here. In the case of parent and child table relationships, a student might have an application. If I look for a field on the application table, will all students without applications be excluded from the results? No. So again, when you're bringing in field, we're not matching on anything just yet. We're going to do all that match stuff on the next screen where we say which fields have to match. Up here, we're just saying these are the fields to show. So even if we're showing it from a related table, doesn't matter if there's a value there or not. Down here, if you're making a condition on it, though, then yes, the records have to meet that condition to be considered. Okay, because right now, I'm ignoring everything. Well, okay, that condition's not added, but everything where the states is not one of these four. But let's say the account name is blank for one of these records. Doesn't matter. Still going to be pulled in. We'll just see a blank field value. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right. And okay, so just to sort of round out this conversation, what's down here, you can use the bulk API now to merge records, but you can't really use conditioning here. The only conditioning that can be done are for fields on the account object. There's no table joining conditions here, whereas in select records to search, you do have table joining conditions. So I could say only look for records where the owner name equals, and then I choose somebody. Okay, here I cannot do that sort of thing because there's no table join for the bulk API. I can include the owner's field name, but that's it. These two things, again, more of the advanced stuff, but select master, non-master records from file. If you have a list of IDs that on one column are non-master and then a list of IDs on another column that are master records, you can now load that file in and dedupe from that file. If you have DupLocker or, oh, I can't remember the name of that, data.com, okay, where you can find duplicates. Any warnings from your DupLocker scenarios will show here, so you can actually merge data from those warnings in bulk rather than doing them one at a time in the DupLocker interface. If you have data.com or what's that? It's a new Salesforce merge, I think it's Dupe Management. If you have that and you have some duplicates sitting out there, they don't give you a way to merge them. You just see them there. This will show up those scenarios. If you have that plugin, the tab will show up and you can merge them from here too. But again, that's more the advanced, newer stuff, but just so you know what those things are doing. So for the basic things, you're just going to be using this first tab to select records to search. Okay, so before we go to screen 2, let's just recap again. You choose your object to dedupe, either with a drop-down and clicking Use Object, or with a pre-built scenario. Then you come to the right, select the fields to view when the dupe results are brought back to you. Okay, so what data for the duplicate records do you want to see? Also be sure to include fields that will help you identify which record is the master, and then if you really want to merge those records. Down at the bottom, you create conditions potentially, or you can use all of your records. The conditions allow you to get to a more specific set of your data, keeping in mind that it is excluding other sets of your data, okay, which we found that out through some questions that were asked. Using all is saying, yep, let's evaluate every single account record we have. And in a lot of cases, that's okay. It's just when you start getting into, you know, I've got 700,000 records, or I've got 2.4 million account records, then you either want to use the bulk API or you want to subset down with conditions. Once you get that set up, you can progress to step 2, and this is where we tell the system which fields have to match for records to be a dupe, and the mapping type is how they have to match. If you're starting from scratch, this page will be blank, and you'd have to start by clicking Add Mapping Condition. Since we've loaded up a pre-built scenario, we've got some fields here. Okay, but if you click Add Mapping Condition, this is what it'll look like. Give you a drop down to all your fields. Okay, and if you want to get out of one of these, just click Escape. So if I clicked in here, it's like, oh, oops, it looks like I have to reselect my phone field. You don't, just click Escape and it'll take you out. You said step 2, you meant step 5, right? Nope, I meant step 2. Look down here at the button. This is step one. Now there might be multiple sub-steps in this main step. Say 1, 2, 3, but view it as screens then. So screen 1, screen 2, screen 3. There's only ever going to be 3 screens, and there's different steps, I guess, within a screen. So, but this is step 2. Oh, you're looking at the candy canes. I see. So that's a good point. The little, I like that you call them candy canes because I think they were meant to be life preservers, but I thought candy canes too. These are help icons. And these are the things that if you hover over, they give you this little pop-up, and you can read some help text. And so yes, the idea behind these being numbered, which we've hemmed and hawed about between all of us, is that they will show you the logical progression of steps as a new user. So you start here, choose your object, and then you come down and you choose, I don't even know where 2 is anymore. Do I have it hidden? Yeah. Choose your fields, and then step 3, to me, this seems completely out of order now, because why would I load a scenario after I've chosen fields and already chosen my object? So that's where it gets a little funny with the numbers. Like, yeah, they sort of go in the same order, but don't get too caught up, because you can, move around and go back and forth and change things, but to give you an idea of how to progress, yes. But number 3, right off the bat, throws me off, because I'm like, I've already done some of that. So this should be like a combination of 1A, 1B, because you can start either way, and then 2, in my humble opinion. And if you really don't want these things to be confusing, under Edit and Options, oh no, they still number them, that's right, they just did a different color. I know some people hate those little life preservers, so if you want something solid, you can choose that. Or you can totally turn them off if you want. But for the novice, even for me, I just like having them because they're easy access to stuff. All right, so back to fields to match on. A couple things you guys need to know about how we match data. This is going to make your life a bit easier when you start looking at the results and wondering why they showed up the way they did. We talked about step 1 here, how to OR things, right? You can turn on expert mode and do your OR condition. In step 2, however, everything is ANDed. So when you choose a field to match on, you're saying this field, and this field, and this field, and this field, and this field. All have to match between 2 or more records for them to be considered a dupe. There is no ORing here. ORing happens when you do another pass. So let's talk about that. And normally I talk about this in the beginning, but we need to understand that when you're trying to find duplicates, this isn't going to be, let's find all of my duplicates all at once and then be done for that object. You can, but honestly, I think that is far more time consuming and less efficient. Really what you should be doing is taking this in manageable chunks. So your first pass, the first thing that we're doing, and let me step back to step 1 again, is we're doing our rigid criteria. And you'll notice the naming conventions over here. And the rigid is representative of the duplicates that you can say with a very high confidence level, maybe with not even looking at them, that yeah, these are duplicates because of the fields that you matched on. So if I can say 2 records or more that match on name, street, city, postcode, phone, I'm like, yeah, those are dupes. I don't need them in my system. Let's get them merged. So it takes care of some of the easy, obvious duplicates first. Your first pass may not render you a ton of results, and you might get discouraged and be like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Nothing. A lot of the exact duplicates, will be a small group because end users, if they were that exact, probably would have found them, if they did any sort of searching. So the first pass, don't be discouraged if it is a small group or number, but remember that these should provide to you the results that you feel really confident in, that there's very minimal, if at all, any spot checking you have to do to verify that they should be merged. As you progress throughout this whole dedupe process, you're going to do another pass. After we merge the records that get brought back to us from this pass, we're going to come back in, we're going to do another pass, and maybe we call it our semi-rigid. Either way, it's less strict than what we're doing now. And this will broaden your reach, open up, looking at more records, because maybe you say, what, on this second pass, I'm not going to match on phone. We're just going to match on these fields. So the phones could be different. They could be blank. All right, so that's another reason that we suggest having multiple passes. When you choose a field to match on, not only are these values ANDed, but the default behavior is saying we're only going to look at records where these fields are populated with a value, because we, by default, match populated fields to populated fields. We will never be able to say, oh, this blank value, yeah, that's a duplicate value of this populated value, because it's not. A blank is never the same as a populated value. And a lot of people get annoyed with that because they're like, well, it's blank. It is blank. However, it's not the same. Okay, and that's what we're doing here. We're matching. We're finding similarities. Couple ways to, even on your rigid scenarios, broaden your reach a little bit. Keep the point in mind, we will never match a populated field to a blank field value. Okay, we will match populated to populated, and if enabled, blank to blank. If you want to start seeing situations where maybe one record has a phone number and its duplicate doesn't, that's when we say run a different path, take off phone, don't use it as a point of comparison. You can still view the data, of course. So back on step 1, you can always pull it in as a field to view, but on step 2, we're not going to use it as a parameter for comparison. Okay, so I would remove that. And it's not necessarily the phone field. It could be whatever field makes sense for you guys. All right, so let me give you examples of what will and will not show up. And these are generic. I'm not using anything data specific here, but if you have 2 or more records that are populated and match on all of these fields, name, street, city, postcode, phone, those results will be returned to you on the grid that we're about to get to. If you have 2 or more records that match on populated field values of name, street, city, postcode, phone is blank for both or all of them, or populated for all of them, then we'll find you a match. All right, but if you say, okay, all of these fields, but phone's populated on one, not populated on the other, that will not be returned to you. And I'm just using phone as an example. It's not because it's the last field or any other reason, it's just the field I'm using. All right, there's a whole bunch of questions popping up here. For a Monday morning, I'm happy you guys are involved. Okay, when you get to this point, can you talk about when you use fuzzy? Yes, I will definitely define all of this stuff for you, for sure. Let's see, but if both fields were blank, they would match, correct? That is correct, only if you have match blank turned on. If I didn't have this turned on, then no. Those 2 blank values would not be returned as a match. So yeah, you just got to make sure it's enabled. Soren, I know you have the question out there, and when we start talking about contacts, I will address it, I promise. Okay, so remember these fields are ANDed to each other. It's not like we're going to show you records that say, oh, name and street matched on these 2, and then city and postcode matched on these other ones. No, we do an all or nothing type thing, which is why we say do multiple steps. And some people are like, well, why wouldn't you show me the percentage? What does the percentage matter? Either they match or they don't. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to know what matched on, 30% of my fields. Is that really a match to me? I don't know. But if I can get results that say, of the fields and mapping types that you used, all of these records match based on those parameters, I feel pretty good about that. There's just less sifting through of information that I have to do. Okay, match category, don't even waste your time on it. I'm surprised it's still in here. This, just so you know what it is, will not affect your data. It's a sorting category for the mapping type. So it says, show me all mapping types. And in my drop-down, I see every mapping type available. If I said, show me just things meant for numeric values, in my mapping type drop-down, now it filters the ones that were made specifically for numeric. However, people get clever with our mapping types, and they use them for all sorts of different things, so I don't limit myself with a category. I just ignore it. The mapping types, though, are important. They are going to dictate your matches just as much as your query conditions here and the field you have to match on. Now, I'm not going to go over every single mapping type, because even if I gave you every definition, you're not going to remember it. And I've been working here for 10 years, using this for about 13, and every once in a while I still have to go back to my help bubble and go to my link and look at the mapping types, because some I use more frequently than others, and I've got those definitions down pat, but others I use infrequently, so I have to just remind myself of the nuances to make sure I know what I'm doing. And if you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to use something I don't know what it's doing, this is going to be some trial and error for you, okay? So use the mapping type, render results. If you don't like them, you don't have to do anything with them. Nothing happens to them in Salesforce unless you actually merge data. So you can run this and get yourself some results and see how it's presented back to you and decide for yourself which mapping types work best for your data. There's no universal scenario that's going to work for everybody. It's just not that simple, okay? Because we make our own decisions on what we do with our data and why. How did I get to the definitions again? New problem. I was referencing your bubble 5 for you. So if you go there, you've got a link right at the bottom, and that'll take you. Typically, whenever you see a help bubble next to these buttons anywhere in the app, it's going to take you to a help doc link to the definition. But you could be like me, and here, let me go to, and I have my help as my favorites on my bar, so I go to DT help, and then, you know, I can either scroll through the tree or I can search terms. Honestly, I hate the search. I think it's easier just to expand these trees. We try to name these things kind of obviously. Always a good idea to know the 35,000 different ways to get to the help doc, because right when you need it, you'll forget. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to get there. Okay. So we were talking about the definitions, and let me go back to that page because I will reference it here. Oh, wrong tab. There we go. The nice thing about this page too, not because I'm lazy and don't want to tell you the definitions, but sometimes visuals help. You know, we're seeing it on my screen, but when you can sit and look at your own pace instead of mine, it may be a bit more beneficial. Okay, but I will talk about fuzzy transpose and alpha clean. When we're talking about matching on the account name, whether we're working with accounts or contacts, anything that references the account name, we have a mapping type called cleaned account name. And this one's pretty cool because it is customizable. Okay, we have some other here that I will touch on briefly, but the cleaned account name for me would be where I would recommend to start. It references the account cleaning list button on the top left, and this is where you make your customization. It goes through and does 3 different functions, and I realize these say replace and remove, but understand we're not changing your data in Salesforce with these. We're changing just how the data is evaluated. So if your value in Salesforce says Johnson ampersand Johnson in the account name, it's always going to stay that way. We're not changing it to the word and. We're just saying that, oh, ampersands and the word and with a space in front and behind should be seen the same. So if the record is Johnson and Johnson, it can match to one called Johnson ampersand Johnson. All right. Let me back up a little bit too with these. So let's talk about what goes on in the replace tab, the suffix and the prefix in their own, you know, individual order here. But just so you have an idea of, you know, the fact that they say replace, remove, we're not doing that. Even when you merge the records, we're not removing or replacing anything. Your values will stay the same as what you have them in Salesforce. This is just for data comparison. So when we're looking at it, we can find you duplicates without them having to be exact. Don't worry about the fact that it says existing and new value. Those are misnomers. They were just the stock numbers that were there when we started using this. The replace tab looks anywhere in the string of the field value. So in this case, anywhere in the string of the account name. And so like this one with parentheses, or I'm sorry, not parentheses, with a hyphen, period, comma, apostrophe, we're just ignoring those and seeing them as a blank value. And no, you do not have to put every single punctuation in here to be ignored. You can turn on alpha clean, and I'll give you the definition of that in a minute. You can also do word abbreviation substitutions. Okay, so we have Saints, and we're also saying that is equivalent to ST. None of these tabs are case sensitive, and do not use punctuation when working with words. So you'll notice we don't have ST period, we just have ST. In part because period is being ignored here and seen as a blank value, but also because we can turn on alpha clean and have punctuation ignored. So the two can work together. When you do a word abbreviation substitution, put the long form on the left, abbreviation on the right. Okay, that's really what they should say. But then you got stuff like this where, you know, we're a Canadian company. In the U.S., we spell center ER. In Canada, it's RE. There's no reason those should be seen differently by my computer here, by demand tools. So I'm telling them center and center RE are the same. O with an umlaut is the same as just regular O, and then abbreviations, you know. You'll always have an open box down here to make additions. And if you want to get rid of a value, click the blue box, or in this case, the gray box, to the left and delete on your keyboard. Then it goes over and does a suffix and prefix removal. And these do not have to be in any order. Values do not have to be next to each other. We just did this way for ease of looking at it. So if a record is called Johnson & Johnson Company and its duplicate is Johnson & Johnson Incorporated, we're ignoring company, we're ignoring incorporated, so those don't matter. So we're just saying Johnson & Johnson. The ampersand and the and are already being accommodated for here, so those two will match. Now what if it's the Johnson & Johnson Company and one is just Johnson & Johnson? On the prefix side, we ignore the, and then the rest fall in place too. And they're all being evaluated down at that point to just be Johnson & Johnson. All right, no punctuation. Oops, I've sorted it alphabetically when you click on your header. And you could put things, let's see, do I have that one in here? No. Like, maybe you work with doctors, and a lot of people do hosp instead of hospital. Maybe some people put in hospital. All right, and then you click save. And throughout anywhere in the program that uses this functionality, those values are now put there for not just a single table dedupe, but find IDs. Okay. And certainly, you know, customize that for language, locale, business industry. Oh, my question pop out has gone away. Hang on. I see more questions up there. Sorry, guys, I didn't see it coming through. All the things on this page are irrespective of the scenario. In other words, you'd have to do them each time and they're not saved in the scenario. No, these are saved in the scenario. For sure. The scenario, because, I mean, if we're not going to save this stuff, why save the scenario, right? So all of your settings that, oh, well, wait a minute. Are you talking about, okay, let me answer this a different way. Yes, everything that you're doing here, if you save your scenario, will be saved. The checkboxes, everything. It will not be saved with the pre-built scenario unless I save it. So even though I'm making modifications here, no, it's not overriding what the pre-built started out as. You have to resave. So maybe that's what you meant too. All right, so we've got match blank on phone. We talked about clean account name. Let's move over and talk about these engines. Some of the engines, depending on the field that you're mapping on, will be disabled. So like right now I'm trying to click fuzzy on street address and it won't work. So we try to, and I hate saying it this way, but sort of dummy proof it, because sometimes, you know, as you're getting used to this and sometimes you're just not thinking on a Monday morning and you try to turn things on that you shouldn't. So we try to help you out in that regard. But these engines work in conjunction with the mapping type. The fuzzy is our phonetic match. People will say, oh, I did a fuzzy match, and they have no basis for what that means. But in our tool, we have a very specific definition, and it does a metaphone. So when this is enabled, it looks at the word in the field that it's applied against, in this case, the account name. And let's say the word is Hewlett-Packard. it's going to make that into a phonetic by removing the vowels and just analyzing how the consonants sound when the word's pronounced. So Hewlett-Packard, when you get rid of the vowels, phonetically sounds the same as Howlett-Packard. Because if we get rid of the vowels in Howlett-Packard, we're left with the same consonant sounds between Hewlett-Packard and Howlett-Packard. Fuzzy will also ignore spaces and numbers, which is why you cannot turn it on for street address, which I was trying to do here. Okay, so fuzzy is great for picking up on spelling mistakes. We also have transpose, and that transposes at the word level, not letter, so at the word level. And it says that regardless of the order of the words, if the words are the same, they can still be seen as a match. A record called Salesforce Foundation, one called Foundation Salesforce, same words, different order, with transpose enabled, we can still see those as a dupe. Then we have alpha clean. And again, we touched on this a little bit with the clean account name, but that will only look at English alphabet letters A through Z and numbers 0 through 9. Ignores foreign characters and punctuation. And if we look at the help doc, so it's just for ASCII data. And a lot of people think, okay, I've got all three of these turned on. That's great. I'm really opening myself up for different duplicates to come through. Not true. So don't get caught in the trap of I've got all three turned on. That's as loose, not loose, but that's as broad as I can get. These engines will interact differently with one another. So sometimes turning it on like this may render more results. This may render more results. It just depends on your data, which is why I'm telling you some of this will be trial and error. And even after you finesse down a system, you still want to invoke some of these engines just on the off chance that new data input stuff is happening, you know, new users get hired, whatever. All right, so don't be afraid to play around with this. So moving down to billing street, we're using street address match. Built into that, this is not customizable. It'll see things like 123 Main Street as a match to 123 Main Ave. It ignores the road indicator. It also ignores, well, doesn't ignore, but it sees things like N in north as the same, W in west, the number and the spelled out variation, so first in 1ST or 1 in ONE. Sometimes I turn on alpha clean here just in case there's any punctuation that I want ignored. Rogue punctuation can really inhibit finding dupes. Moving down to city, we have an exact mapping type. Exact is 100% exact spelling, spacing, and punctuation. Okay. Which perfect for things like email address when you're matching on contacts and leads. Great for things like city, but I also like to turn on the fuzzy, maybe the alpha clean, just to loosen it up a bit. And keep in mind, the looser you go with these things, the less rigid your scenario is. So don't be afraid to just run that first rigid scenario and see what happens. Postal code, we're using zip 5 and 9, and that is very US-centric. It allows for a 5-digit numeric postcode to match to its 9-digit numeric counterpart. It will not corrupt alphanumeric matches if we're outside of the US. It essentially just reverts to exact at that point. If most of your postcodes, most of your data is outside of the US, then I would probably use exact here or just not match on the postcode. And then for phone, we're actually going to use numeric. Built into that, it ignores parentheses, hyphens, and alpha characters. So as long as the numbers are the same and in the same order, you've got yourself a match. Something I like to point out with phone numbers is periods. Periods are a relevant numeric character. We're talking dollars and cents. So we don't want to automatically ignore that with our numeric mapping type. But when we're talking about phone numbers, the use of a period is irrelevant. It's not proper formatting. So with the alpha clean turned on, we can ignore those periods. And you might be thinking, well, Salesforce is going to automatically format when I type in the UI anyway, which is true. But if you import data through the API, data loader, Mass Effect, it's going to take whatever you have in there for your phone field and put it into Salesforce. So if in your spreadsheet they're separated with periods, they're going to end up that way in Salesforce. And sometimes you need to have that stuff ignored. Okay. And that's it. Once you've decided I'm good with the fields I'm matching on, I like my settings, you can move on to step 3 and start looking at your results. At this point, I do like to start the saving of my scenario, understanding I'll have to save it again once I enable different options on the next screen. But, you know, if something crashes or Salesforce, I don't know, something weird goes on, I don't want to lose all this thought process and stuff that I've done. So I'll click Save Scenario. And I can either overwrite the one I started with by clicking Save, or I can save it as my own. Oops. No, don't want to do that. Interesting. That was weird. It was so long, it wouldn't let me delete it. Okay, so then it brings up this page for you. And you can type in this, like if you wanted to put maybe on here, MB for match blank, you can do that. All right, and if I go back to screen 1 and look at that, see, it shows me my synopsis here. So there's my scenario and whatever modifications. So you can type notes in there, you know, and you have the scenario description at the top too to give a brief synopsis of what this is going to do. So you can also put something at the top. All right, let's go on to step 3. When it's sitting here at 0 out of 100, we're just waiting for Salesforce to see the job and accept it. Once we start chugging through numbers, then we know things are working. Salesforce is taking our job through the API, and it's going to return us some results. How quickly will this run is going to depend on a lot of things outside of your control and ours. Most importantly, the API traffic. It's 11 o'clock Eastern time. The West Coast has just come on. They're processing things, you know, so it may be a little bit slower right now. And honestly, this is not a good representation because I'm clearly having computer issues. So the API traffic, the internet connectivity speed, how many records you have in your database, you know, so all those things not working against you, but nothing you can manipulate. All right. Look at the lower left. We have 737 accounts in 317 groups. So 737 individual account records are represented here in this huge long list, and they've been placed into 317 duplicate groups. And as you can see, groups can be 2 or more. All right, we got 2 here, we've got, I don't know, 5 here. All right, it's just whatever records matched based on the parameters in screen 1 and 2 is what's going to be resulted here. So a group, which this is a group, all of these records you can merge down into one. You don't have to merge all of them together if you don't want to. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this is not an all or nothing screen. You still get to decide what happens to which records. The first part of this was just simply saying, help me find my duplicates, and here's how we're going to do it. And if you don't like how this is panning out, if you're like, these are just the most ridiculous results, these are false positives, not really duplicates, go back to step 2 and revamp your mapping type. You know, let me turn on match blank for city, and let's see if that opens up any more data for us. And you can see how it picked up a little bit quicker this time because I made that connectivity to the API. All right, so I've got more. I had, what, 317 groups last time? Now I have 402. All right, and 1,146 records instead of, I think it was 700 and some. All right, so minor changes like that. I just turned on match blank for billing city. Can really open up what is brought back to you. And maybe for a first pass, this might be too much for you to get through. I don't know. But you don't have to go through the entire grid to merge some of it either. Okay. Let me just check the questions. I haven't seen anything come through. All right. So at this screen, we at this point have to decide what's going to happen to the data. We've done our due diligence. We now see where the duplicates exist. How do we want to handle these? Do we want to merge them together? Do we want to merge all of them, just a few in the group? Is there any data that might need to be changed? A lot of different things to consider here. Okay, so which part of your scenario is causing 4th Street with a number to match to 4th Street spelled out? That is because of the street address mapping type that we applied to the billing street. So that street address mapping type said, let me look at this field, and I can say that the number 4, or 4th, is also seen as 4th spelled out. Most of our address mapping types, all of them, will do that. Good question. So the data and how it's showing up as matching here is directly correlated to the mapping type that was applied to the data. Let me see if I can't find another example. Hang on. And you can expand these fields. You can expand and collapse the groups, especially if they're big ones and you need to just get them out of the way. Okay, Calaruso and Sons. Calaruso and Sons. The clean account name mapping type helped with this. Now you'll notice on the billing city and the phone, remember that we had match blank turned on. So you can see we're getting things where the phone is populated and matched, also where they're blank for all of them. Same thing for city, blank or populated and matched. Okay, if I had not turned on match blank, this record wouldn't show up, nor would this one. Okay, this group wouldn't be here. This group wouldn't be here because I didn't do match blank for city. Neither would this one. Okay, so if I turned off those match blank options, it will lessen my results. I'm just scrolling through here real quickly to see if I see anything else. Okay, so this is a good example of zip 5 and 9. 5-digit matching to its 9-digit counterpart. And also, this full name for owner, remember I pulled that in my table join in screen 1? If the owner is highlighted in green, it means that they're an active user. If they're highlighted in red, it means they're inactive. So just a quick visual indicator for you so you can see who's owning your data. Okay, that question that just came in, I will address in a moment. Now we need to decide, since we have these dupes, what are we going to do with them? And in order for records to be merged, each group has to have a master record. There's 3 different ways of defining which record in the group should be the master, and we're going to talk about all 3 of them. So let me explain what a master record means. A master record indicates that you're keeping the field level values from that record unless otherwise specified with additional options that are available. And those additional options would be update fields where master is empty, combine field values, or using field rules. Okay, and again, field rules is not something we're going to go over today. Update fields and combine fields, those are things we're going to discuss. That's standard functionality. So the first way of choosing a master would be double-clicking the pin. I'm looking at what I've got here, and I like this one. So I'm going to double-click its pin. They turn green or red. Green indicates the master. Red indicates the subordinate. If you don't have checkboxes and X's, that's fine. If they're just red and green, in my options, I turned on the colorblind setting. Where did I do that? Oh, use alternate icons for single table dedupe. All right, that just helps. So if people are colorblind, since we're using reds and greens and blues, they can see the character in there instead of just the color. I like seeing it just because I just think it's a better way to look at it. So this is the master, meaning we're going to keep the field level values from this record. So Tom Filica, Inc. will be the name saved. And because this is a rigid match, a lot of my data already looks the same. All right. And again, I pulled in that owner field name because this is the owner ID. I don't know anybody's owner ID. I don't even know if that's mine. But because I have the name next to it, I can have that designation. I started in on that thought and we went somewhere else. So I just wanted to round that back out. So that's the first way of selecting a master, double-clicking the pin. When you double-click the pin, they each get a color and they each get a check in their checkbox. If a record does not have a check in its checkbox, it will not be merged with the rest of the records in the group. So that's a way to exclude a record from being merged with the rest of the group records. Now, if it's 2 records in a group, you can't do that. They both have to be checked. If one's not checked, it doesn't get merged. But when there's more than 2, this is how you handle that. Now you're probably thinking, well, it has a colored pin. Doesn't matter. The colored pin is just a courtesy visual indicator for you, so you know which record the system is going to keep as the master based on your selection. Okay, this has no bearing on whether or not the record will be merged. The checkbox does that. Now let's take into consideration the update fields where master is empty and the combined field values. Both of these questions just came in. I'm going to talk about after the rest of the options when we actually start looking at the merging. So I promise I'll get to them. All right, I'm just going to make a quick modification here, and we'll talk about this in a second. But I want to do this for update fields where master is empty. If you have a master record selected and the field level value is blank, but then one of the records being merged into it has a value, like this one, when I merge these records, this will still be the number that's saved on the master, because we have update fields where master is empty and every field is checked. You can pick and choose as you see fit for your data, but by default it's for all of them. So it says if the selected value or if the selected master is blank for that field, then we're going to populate it with the value on another record. And you might be saying, well, what if they have multiple different phone numbers? That's when field rules come into play. You can start getting more granular about which subordinate record value is taken. Combine field values. I'm going to make another modification here. When I merge these records, not only will update fields where master is empty because my product of interest is blank for the master, but it's also going to combine these two if I set it to over here. So if I want demand tools and Duplocker to show up in my product of interest list, I can do that because it's a multi-select pick list. And in the combined field values, you have access to combine the values of multi-select, text area field, and Boolean fields. Checkbox, true, false. Text area is long text area and just text area. And you can say, grab all my multi-select fields, grab all my Booleans, grab all my text area. Or you can pick and choose. If they are not selected under combined field values, they will not be combined. It'll just choose one of these. So I want them to combine, so when I merge it, under my products of interest, it says demand tools and Duplocker. So I have to have it checked here. Look, you guys, you should be on your advanced session with the questions you're asking me. So the question is, can I move the email from a non-master record onto the master record, but put it into a different field, like alternative or alternate email field? Yes, with field rules. So for sure you can do that, but you have to do a field rule for it. The manual way, sorry, couldn't think of the word, to do it if you don't use field rules, which at this point, why wouldn't you use field rules? But if you're just not comfortable with it yet, you can copy the value from one field and paste it to another manually. So you can double click on these fields and open them up for real-time editing in Salesforce like I did up here. Okay, so like in Salesforce right now, this record has that 440 number as its phone number. Even though I made the modification in the grid, it was a real-time update back into Salesforce. Okay. So that's one way of doing it, but honestly, use the field rules. It'd be way easier. Okay, if you combine, yeah, you do have to, okay, you've been using the manual stuff, yeah. Yeah, field rules are awesome. I wish this was the advanced class just because they're fun. All right, so another question. If you combine Boolean, does that mean the yes value always wins? Yes, it does. I'm feeling very useless. You guys already know most of this stuff. Yes, so with Boolean fields, true-false fields, it means that if a true value exists, a true value will win, even if that true value is not on the selected master. Okay, so you don't have to choose your Boolean field or your master record based on your Boolean field or any of these fields because you can combine them. Okay, and for text area, same thing, it'll combine them. Now with text area, you can separate your values with a carriage return or a line feed. That's the normal, so it just enters down to the next field. Or you can use custom verbiage or punctuation to separate the values, especially for like description fields. Those are long text area. Okay. Let's see. More questions. This is probably the most questions I've had in a session. This is kind of cool. When the merge occurs, are the merged information stored for historical or oh wait, that one I was going to do on the merge. Hang on, let me table that one. Okay, so at this point, changes made to the database on the screen do affect our SF data. That's the only change that will, okay? So if you're doing inline editing here, yes, real-time changes happening to your Salesforce data. Merging checked records, real-time changes happening to your Salesforce data. Nothing else, though, will do anything. Checking these boxes, nothing, okay? So you have to see one of those two things to affect your data. I'm trying to think of a line here for the third one. There isn't. It's just those two. No problem. You're right, because I said, nothing's going to affect your data here. And so I should have said there's an asterisk at the end of that sentence, because something will. When's the advanced training? You're going to have to look at the schedule, which is on our website. And if you don't want to wait for that time to come up, log a case and request a recording. We have old sessions recorded, and they all cover the same stuff. You just, might get a different sounding person than me. All right, last question on this topic, and then we're going to move along. If you did a real-time edit but then had a value in the master, wouldn't it overlay what you just saved manually? Yeah, for sure. So if I said update fields where master is empty, and I decided, well, I'm going to put my phone number field in here myself, this phone number, the 832 number, is going to win over this one because it's populated now on the master. So yes, some of your real-time edits here can be overwritten by some of the settings you have triggered for on a merge. All right, so if I did like a real-time edit here, like I just did with that, and then did another one, then obviously this number is going to win out. If I had like if I put people import here for products of interest, then demand tools duplocker would be added to people import because of my combined field values. Cool. All right, the use Salesforce merge call. We do suggest that you use that and keep it checked, and it is by default for accounts, contacts, and leads. We use the Salesforce merge call for ease of use to make sure that your data is handled here the way it is in Salesforce, so you have less nuances to figure out. The merge batch size, you probably don't even need to mess with that until your batches, your groups are over 2,000. So by groups, I mean this number here, where it says 402. Once you start pushing over 2,000 groups, you may want to up this to about 10. We have some stuff in our release notes for 2.6 that talks about this. Okay, and this is just another way for us to not stress out the Salesforce API. We say, take all of the stuff that we're processing and push it up in 5 separate batches, as opposed to one big, huge batch that will take Salesforce longer to process. But you want to keep the use Salesforce merge checked. If you uncheck it, there is a list of caveats in this document you should look through. Most notably would be on movement of archived activities. So if you want activities to move from record to record after those activities have been archived by Salesforce, which they will do every 365 days, unless you request differently, then yeah, keep the use Salesforce merge checked. Reassign to master owner. This is completely optional, and I'm not a huge fan of reassigning records while I'm merging. That's just me. Okay, we have plenty of other modules where I can deal with record reassignment that give me a restore file. So if something goes wrong on the reassignment side, I can reverse it. Remember that merging does not give you restore files. Okay, so just one less thing for me to have to worry about when I'm doing this stuff that I might have to, you know, back up if something goes wrong. So with that comes the advice of don't merge unless you're really sure. You're far better off having duplicates in your database than inaccurately merged data. Unmerging data is not fun for anybody. You know, you have to have a backup, and it's just a tedious process. It's doable. We've all probably been faced with it at one point or another, but if you can save yourself from it, I would suggest it. So be thoughtful when you're doing your merges. If you don't know, don't do it. Ask somebody who does, you know, or send them a spreadsheet of this stuff and have them help you. Just because you're managing the data, I think a lot of people think you should know everything about it, and it's just not the case. Sometimes you need to ask your salespeople. But the reassign to master owner is saying for whatever object you have selected here, okay, we'll say my open cases, all open cases will be reassigned to whomever owns the master record. So in this case, any open case under these records will be owned by Mark. Even if I own one of them currently, because he owns the master record, I'm imposing my master record's ownership on these selected sub-objects. You don't have to do that. All right, let's look at some other options. Delete and prefix. The default behavior of a merge is to delete the subordinate record once we take the information from it that we can, which includes sub-objects. The related list item records get moved over to the master. Field level values that we can move will get moved. And then that skeletal remains of the subordinate records get tossed into your recycle bin. That's default behavior. You can choose to say, well, do all the merging stuff up until the point that it deletes the record, because I don't want it to delete just yet, which is true that it will help facilitate an easier restore of data should you need to do one. But again, don't ever merge your data with the thought that I might have to undo this, because that's just, I mean, unless you have some really good tools involved for data archiving and stuff, it's just, you know, more time consuming than I think that it's worth. So again, this takes the merge to do everything. It still moves the data. It still moves field values, moves related list items. It just doesn't take that final step of deleting. Instead of deleting, it says I'm in the name field or whatever field you choose here. I'm going to prefix it with this verbiage. Can I reorder the columns in this result screen? Absolutely. Drag and drop. And here's another cool thing, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm looking for one record. This is a huge list. I can't find it. You can right-click on a column and do a find. No occurrences. Oops, just because I spelled it wrong. There it is. I mean, you're probably thinking, well, they look like they're alphabetical. They're not. Okay? So that's why the find, I think, is important in there. You guys have so many good questions. I'm just trying to get through this detail here real quick. Extra field logging. So this will be applicable to the files that we spit out to you, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, and the log file. If you want a particular field included in the exported files and your log file, you can choose it here. We automatically give you the Salesforce record ID, but if you want, you know, your custom account number or something else, just choose it and it will be included. In the task creation, do you want a summary task of what happened? Do you want a summary email? Do you want to create a task per merge? Okay, and I'll show you what that means. And we'll do, actually, we'll do all of them. Current user means me, because I'm the one logged in. I'm currently the user. Master owner means whoever owns the selected master record. Okay. So I'm going to assign it to me, not them. I see somebody with their hand raised again. I'm so sorry. I can't unmute you. Just type your question into the questions area, and I'll be sure we talk about it. Okay. Before we merge, I just want to tell you there are some files that get exported automatically with your merge. Now you can, before that happens, export your grid data manually. And it'll export everything that you see here, including if you've selected master records. Okay? So if we export the grid data, we can do it as formatted, which will keep all the formatting that you see here, a raw data file, so no formatting, just the raw data. And it'll have indicators like if we do formatted, and master and subordinate records are selected, they will be denoted by a 28 and a 29, 28 being the master, 29 being the subordinate. There we go. Okay, so it looks, opened it twice, sorry, it looks just like the grid. But here's your master record indicator. So 28's the master, 29's are subordinates. 31s mean nothing has been selected. Okay. The data it's not grouped together. It's just a list of these records. And to group them together, you'd have to sort by a field called CRM Fusion CRM Fusion duplicate key. That will get the groups back together. Okay, and you can do the master non-master file. So if you have the master and non-master records selected, it can spit you out a file that shows that and just that. Okay, so it gives you the IDs of the records. Okay, without all the other, noise of the field value data. Okay, there are two other ways to select your master record before we merge. So let me talk about those, and then some of these questions that have come up we'll start to discuss. The first way, remember, we just double-click the pin. The second way, also a more manual way I'm going to show you, is by doing a right-click on the duplicate key. Do I want that record? Yeah, that's fine. And then doing Set Up Custom Merge. This allows you to have field-level access for every field, not just the fields you've pulled in, to choose which should be selected and which shouldn't. So we still have the master record. That's just so we know which record ID to keep. But I could easily double-click and make this the master. Anything with a highlighted yellow field value means that's the value we're going to keep. If the ink for a field is red, it means it's different than the value kept. If it's green, it means it's the same as the value that's being kept. So quick visual indicators so you know where the differences are and you don't have to scroll through everything. All populated fields are brought to the top. All right, so if I was like, no, I want Kelly to own that, and then I click accept, so I pick and choose at the field level by double clicking. I choose accept, and then the fields turn blue. The button, well, the pins would turn blue, but I have my alternative settings on. And so I've got blue paper clips. And that means there's not really a master record here. It's a mishmash between all of them. And in order to see that, I have to go back into my custom merge and find out which one was selected. Okay, it did keep it. I was just making sure it kept the right one and just reordered them. Okay, now, there's more questions. Hang on. How did I get to that screen? Oh, I did a right click, set up custom merge. Now the third way is using master rules. And a master rule, instead of going through each record individually, is a more en masse way of selecting your master record. You have master rules that are pre-built that you can use as is or modify, or you can make your own. Okay, so if it's something as simple as saying, I want the oldest record in every group to be the master, we have a pre-built for that. Check it off, click Edit Rule so you can see what the settings are. And actually it should look like this. I had modified mine. So it'll say the record that's the oldest gets a score of 99, meaning if it's not the oldest, it gets a score of 0. And that's how it knows which record is the master. You can have multiple values in here, okay? It doesn't have to just be one condition. But just to show you, you have access to all of your standard and custom fields as well as this generic field called record. In that record field, you get some special constraints like owned by, not owned by, oldest or newest, okay? So some of the things that you're like, how would I write that? The constraints are here for those. And you'll see some of these constraints with standard and custom fields too, but check here because some of the more commonly requested ones are only available under record when the condition itself would just be cumbersome for the end user to have to create. So the record that has the most associated assets, and you can say that, right? So this one has the most associated assets. I'm going to give it a score, making it the master. And you can say, well, let's say they have the same amount of assets. Let's say that the record that is has the most recent opportunity. We'll make that a score of 9. So a little bit less important than what's going on. And guys, I know I'm editing this one. I'm just pretending we're creating a new one. The scoring is your weighting system. So which one's most important? And then if they meet the value for both of them, it gets a cumulative score. So if the record has the most assets associated and it has the most recent opportunity, it gets a cumulative score of 19. Whereas a record that just had the most assets gets a score of 9, a record that has just the most recent opportunity, 10, and then the most recent opportunity gets 9. Okay, so you can modify your rules. You can click New Rule and create a new one. And you click Add Condition. And it doesn't always have to be off that record field. I could say that the last activity date is the newest. And then that's sufficient for my value as well. Sometimes the constraint supplies what's needed for the value. Other times, if you said equals, you'd have to give it a value. So we'll do last activity is the newest, or you can do older than. We'll say that the, I don't know, say the newest record and give it a score of 9. Okay, and these are random numbers. You can make it 100, 99, 1, and 2, whatever you want. You also have this option of a score delta. So the way the master rule works, okay, just the way it is, without the score delta turn on. I have my new rule, and I didn't name it. That's why it says new rule. And I'm sort of speeding through some of this because we're coming up on time here. But I want to apply that rule to everything. So I have it checked here, and I can say apply to all, checked or unchecked. So if I don't want to apply it against the stuff that I've manually done, I can say just apply it to the unchecked. And I just did checked instead of unchecked, but you get my point. My mouse is flipping around here. If I said apply to unchecked, see how these go? All right, so if you apply a master rule after you've already done manual selections and you say apply rule to all, it will overwrite the manual selection. So you have to be careful. You'd have to choose unchecked and be sure that you actually choose unchecked, unlike me. All right, and you can see the score it gave. So it's telling you why these scores have shown up. Now, what if you're thinking, oh, well, I want to see that created date field and I didn't bring it in? Click Show More Fields. And you can bring in the created date and the last activity date. So you can check and make sure that your master rule is set up to do what you want. Now, in the event that they all tie, okay, they all get 9, they all get 10, they all get 0. See, this one had 10, this one had 10. It just chooses one from the group. Okay. If I did use score delta. I'm saying that the scores between records in a group have to be different by whatever value I put here in order for a master to be selected. So if I choose 1, I'm saying if 2 or more records tie, don't choose a master. So I'm going to say apply rule to all. And see how this one's grayed out now because I had multiple that were 10? It's saying they tie. These are not different by a value of 1, so I can't choose a master because you have the score delta turned on. So you can then do show and say, show me my unchecked. And you know that there's ties that happen between these data. And that's why masters weren't selected. So maybe you want to go through and manually choose it yourself. The grid horizontal scroll, if you want to start like expanding fields and stuff, it puts a scroll bar at the bottom just to give you a bit more screen real estate to work with. Sorry, I'm just looking through these questions again. All right. So those are the 3 ways of choosing a master. Master rules, just remember that the score is the weighting of that condition. So which ones weight higher for you to be able to choose the master, you know, which conditions are more important. And then they do get a cumulative score, okay? If you have more questions on master rules, let me know, and I'll see if we can't get to those before the end. Okay, so now let's go ahead and merge one of these. So I'm going to show my checked, and I'm just going to merge one group, but I'm going to click this icon. It looks like they're binoculars on a piece of paper. And under Edit and Options, if you have Use Salesforce to view objects selected, when you click that button, it's going to launch you to that specific record in Salesforce. So when I'm testing this out, I open up all my stuff, and then I proceed with a merge. So this last one, this is my master. And let's see here. These other guys, they are my subordinates. This contact will be moved over to this master record. All of my related list item will be moved over. Okay. Let me see. There's some questions I'm processing here. When I choose to merge a group of duplicates, what happens if somebody is using one of those accounts at the point of merge? Does an error pop up? The error would probably show up on your end user side. I'm pretty sure what's happening through the API would trump what they're doing. Now, it's an off chance that you're both going to, these processes are both going to save at the same time. So your likelihood of that is very rare. But they might get an error message that says so-and-so is modifying this record while you were using it. You know, so their stuff might be impeded a little bit, but that could happen if 2 people are using the same record. You know, so your risks, I guess, aren't any greater than just 2 normal people working in the database. And yes, this merge happens in real time, okay? If we say merge and it says it's complete, you're going to see that stuff happen in Salesforce, and that's what we're about to see here just now. Okay, when the merge occurs, is the merge information stored for historical or tracking purposes somewhere in the system? Nope. This is not a data warehousing management system. This is a merge utility. Any historical data saving that you want, you have to do your own data warehousing. Okay, now what can help in those situations are if you have history tracking turned on for certain fields. And yes, if something changed because, you know, whatever, whether you did it in the UI or you did it through the API and demand tools, that field is set to track that history. So it'll show you the old value, the new value, and if set to, who made the change. But we won't do any of that for you. Okay. You do get some files spit out to you, though, that will show you some of the historical information. Like you get one file that shows you, here's all the field level data from these records that you merged. Okay, here's the record that was the master, here's the master record's owner, the subordinate record, and the subordinate record owner. That report is great. So if you have account teams, you can say, I'm going to take the subordinate owner who is no longer the owner of this record because that record was deleted, and I'm going to add them to the account team on the master. In our org, there's a message in the history that tells you the record was merged. Yes, if you have history turned on, it'll tell you if it was merged, for sure. It won't get any more specific than that, though. Okay, my company uses a complicated hierarchy system. How do I merge something that belongs to a different part of the hierarchy? Salesforce hierarchies are kind of 90% done, and they've been that way for the past 13 years, and I don't know why. You got to be careful when you're merging with hierarchies. If something's in two hierarchies, you know, you can pull in fields to say, show me the parent of this, show me whatever, but if we're talking just about account hierarchy for parent accounts and subordinate accounts, my best suggestion to you is to install our free parent fixer tool. It basically finishes out the code that Salesforce didn't finish on their hierarchy. And I don't want to say didn't finish, they just aren't concerned with putting it in. So we put that in there, so when you're merging, it'll retain those hierarchies for you. So my suggestion is install that tool. It takes about 3 seconds. There's no setup. There's really nothing. It's just embedding code into your system, so when you do merge, the hierarchies are kept intact. So install it, make a test account that has different hierarchies you're concerned with, do the merge. It's called Parent Fixer. And see if it behaves the way you want it to. And if you have questions on that or if it's doing something funny, let me know. But you can find it on the App Exchange. You can find it on our website. But if you have hierarchies at all and you're merging, install Parent Fixer. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, if you are merging and you want to see with the parent record, be sure to pull in that field. So if you're merging a record with its parent, you can see that. Cool. All right. Okay. So I have not activity. Where's my account history? Did somebody take that off? Oh, there it is. Okay, so you can, if you have your account history turned on for tracking anything, then you'll see the merge thing there. If you don't, then you won't. I'm going to right-click on this duplicate key and click Merge Group because it'll just affect this group. If I click Merge Check Record, notice how it says check. Everything with the check in this checkbox will try to be merged. Okay, so here, we'll unmerge that one. So we'll see that it stays out there as its own. Right-click, merge the group. My mouse is just clicking all over. There we go. You're going to see this pop up every single time you merge. No restore file is created. No restore file is created. Say that to yourself whenever you're merging, because I don't know how many times you get emails. Where's my restore file from my merge? There isn't one. There never will be one. We give you this pop-up because of that. So if you get annoyed with the pop-ups we sort of repeat ourselves with, it's because people need to have that reminder, especially when it's about time to process. So, and even if you ask us the question, then we won't be mad. We understand. This can be stressful, when you're dealing with the data that everybody's working with. So if you accidentally click that, cancel or no will end the process and you won't do anything. If you like what you're doing, click yes, and it'll proceed. Now I have prefix turned on, okay? So that's why we're seeing undeleting non-master records. Okay, when it's done, you get a log file. If there are any errors, they will be listed in your log file. If the error does not make any sense to you, send us your log file and say, this is what I was doing, what happened? And we'll let you know. There were no errors here, though, so we're good. But it shows the IDs that were merged. And had I had information in my account number field, it would have been logged there as well. Okay, I just didn't have anything in there. So if we go to this guy, he was my first record that I unchecked. Or was he? And then this guy, if I refresh, no, he was the first record I unchecked, my bad. That was from something different. So notice he doesn't have delete in front of his name, okay, because I unchecked him. He was not included in the merge process. He was ignored. This guy was included, so now he's going to have delete triple star. So this was a subordinate record. Any related list items that existed here have now been moved over to the master, which is this record. And in my account history, you're going to see that it was merged. And my contacts have gone up. All right. And then whatever field level values got brought over. And the last modified you'll show is me just now. You lost my screen. If you lost my screen, that's got to be on your end, because I'm still showing. Nobody else has lost me. Sorry. All right, and you can see in the grid here, the pin turns yellow. That's how you know it's been merged, and the rest are still out there. So even if you only do one because you want to test it, you can still stay in the screen and still work with the stuff that you've already touched. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to save my scenario again and just resave over because of all my different settings I have here. Okay, and it saves all this stuff. Now, I should have had the task. So records merged, and in this task, it shows you the IDs and the owner. So there's that stuff, and then of course the account number, but it was blank. But that was that extra field logging field. So you can get stuff like that. I don't know if that helps with the history stuff, but at least you know the old IDs, especially with back-end systems. Speaking of back-end systems, when you merge, you get under Documents, Demand Tools Data. Some are in your log files, some are in your restore files. So I get this merged record in my log file, and it shows the time the merge happened, the object being merged, the master ID, who owns the master, the merged ID, and who owned the merged, and then the account number from both. All right, so at least you know the IDs. So if you're like, okay, my back-end system is looking for this ID, we need to replace it with this ID. Or this person used to own this record, they don't have access to see this person's record, I need to add them to the account team for this record because it's the master. Okay, this file can be used for a lot of that stuff. You can call it whatever you want, move them around, we don't care. Once we give them to you, they're yours, and we're not looking to do anything with them. Then in the, gotta go to my restore file here. I hate that it's under restore because it's not technically a full restore, but the merge data is going to give you the ID of the record and then the field level values. The related list item is a real pain in the butt. I mean, it's easy to put the field level values back, but to reassociate the sub-objects is kind of the cumbersome part of restoring a merge. Can you use the record ID to search a recycling bin? I don't know. If that's more of a Salesforce thing. I don't think so, but you might be able to. I don't know. You'd have to try that one out. Okay. I wanted to do another example with contacts. I just don't think we're going to have time. And that's okay. You guys had a lot of great questions. I'm hoping this was enough to get you started. And we've covered all the basics that I wanted to cover. I did kind of want to run this once with contacts. And we have a question out there on that came in an hour ago. So they have data coming in from a source that typically gives bad data. But they have email address or a phone or a regular address. So they want to know, is using name, birth date, and account enough information to allow a reliable matching? I don't know, because I don't know your data. If that's reliable enough for you, then yeah. I mean, if you can say that they have the same name, they have the same birth date, they're associated to the same account, I would say that sounds like pretty solid information. But do you? Based on what you guys do with your data, and I'm not being a jerk here, I mean this, like, I can't say for sure because I don't know what your data is even looking at. But if it's based on people, you're probably hard-pressed to find the person with the same name born on the same date, right? So I would say that's pretty good. If you're feeling like the data supporting your match is lacking, then just do yourself the favor of looking through the results. You know, checking the ones that are good, not checking the ones that are bad. And I know people are always looking for a very automated, fast way to do this stuff. And I'm sorry, data just isn't like that all the time. Sometimes, yes. But for the more tedious processes like this, you're going to have to just buckle down and sit down and go through it sometimes. You know, and then once your data gets better and better and you have more validation rules in place or field requirements or, you know what I mean, triggers that update things or processes that you're doing to make sure stuff is standardized, then your deduping efforts will become a bit more streamlined because your data is more streamlined. So I hope that makes sense. Now, one of the things I want to point out with contacts, when you're merging, and I'm going to clear this out, you're going to see an option to do within and between accounts. Within an account is just like if you were in Salesforce and you went to your contacts and you said merge contacts. It's only going to show you the contacts under that account that you're looking at. So in this case, it's not just one account, it's all your accounts, but the duplicate contacts all share or are related to the same account ID. Okay, so that's within an account. Between accounts means there doesn't have to be anything similar about the accounts that these contacts are associated to. I'm relying just on contact level fields. Okay, so this is between accounts. Notice there's nothing referencing the account. We've got first name, last name, email, phone. Those are all contact level fields. Within an account, first name, last name, email, but you have account ID. This is how you know if it's within an account. You have the criteria on the second screen of account IDs and exact mapping type. So within each group, it has to match on the account, first name, last name, email. And on the with or the between contacts, you can say, well, the account name needs to match and use the clean account name mapping type. But again, this is another reason we tell you to do accounts first. Just makes deduping your contacts a bit easier. Is there a way to see detail on the scoring for the master rule? Your detail on the scoring is in the score. So if you remember my rule, last activity had a score of 10, newest record had a score of 9. So if the record got 9, it was for that condition. If it got 10, it was for the last activity condition. You just kind of got to remember or know the rule that you're applying. And if it hit on both or all of them, then it's the cumulative score. So that's why you want to make sure you score them differently and you give them the points in order of importance. Right? Because if like your most valuable condition, right, would have the highest score. Because you're like, if all else fails, then yeah, let's rely on this piece. But there's these other pieces involved too, so let's see if we can't find the record that has all of these pieces together. Does that make sense? And I know I keep saying this to you guys, but the stuff that isn't really hitting home with you, draw up some test scenarios and apply the rules, do some merges, see how it's interacting for yourself. For me, anyway, that's the best way I can learn, is I see what I'm doing over here, and then I need to see the result on the other side. And then I can put the two together, okay? Don't be afraid to use this in your sandbox, too. I mean, you could, of course, put your test data in your production if that's the only one you have. And if that is the only one you have, go get yourself a free dev org. Dump some data in there and start merging in there. For each condition in the master rule will only ever be added to the total score one time. Yes, for that record. Absolutely. Okay, but here on step 2, going back to the account thing or contact thing, within an account, between accounts. Okay. When you're working with different objects, your standard settings here are all going to stay the same. You just have to work with different fields, because we're looking at a different table in Salesforce. We have about 2 minutes left. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. And normally I'd stick on a little bit longer if you needed me to, but I have a meeting that backs up to this one today. And I'm just letting this run so you can see what's going on with contacts. But thank you guys. Before you drop off, honestly, thank you for showing up and taking the time. We hold these free sessions monthly, a few times a month, because we want you guys to be informed easily and for free. So be sure to check out our other sessions. If the schedule doesn't work with yours, ask us for a recording. We have them, so we're happy to send them to you. And if you guys have feedback, please, please, please tell us, whether it's on the training, my training style, the program, whatever it is. You guys are the ones dealing with us. We want to know how you feel about it. So email me directly or send in something for a case. If you don't feel comfortable with me, that's okay. Oh, well, thanks, guys. I'm just getting some stuff typed into questions. I'm happy that it was helpful. All right, so here, just so you guys can see, I did not search between accounts or within an account. I searched between accounts. These are still showing up. It looks like the same account, but I don't know. I am not seeing the ID. I can tell for sure these are different. So I know that this is between accounts when I start seeing stuff like this. All right, even though these might look like they're within an account, obviously between accounts here. All right. Okay, I got a jet, so I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you again. Have a good rest of the week, and good luck with single table dedupe. If you have questions, let me know. Bye, guys.